Hi guys, it's Lori and I'm back. I hope you're doing well and that the world is treating you good and things are going your way and the universe is just kind of giving back to you and yeah, you're feeling good. That's what I'm hoping. I really loved all the comments on the last video about the church and the wealth and all that kind of thing. So many of you chimed in with different information, more updated information, and it was so interesting to hear about it all. It just is very freeing to know that I'm not a part of that, that I'm not giving money towards that organization, church, cult, let's call it a cult, because it's really, really disturbing, isn't it? Anyway, the other day I did a video, the one before that, talking about um, my music teacher who had died suddenly, choked to death. And if you haven't watched it, you can go back and watch it before this one so it'll make more sense. But I ended it talking about what was to come as I continued to date what would have been her stepson had he was for a short period, but she introduced us on a blind date, and yeah, so I continued to date him after all that, and I'm about to tell you the story of that. And it's like, who the bleep did I marry? Who the heck did I marry? Why in the world did I marry? That's what it's about. So if you're interested, stay tuned. And if you like it. Comment. You know I love your comments. I always respond. I always read them and respond. Always, always, always. And if you subscribe, I'd be so grateful. And yeah, I guess you could use your notifications so you know when I'm coming back. And yeah, let's get started. Oh, before we get started, if anybody has any type of issue with hearing about emotional abuse, physical abuse, um, SA, which you know what that is, or force, or anything of that nature, this might not be the video for you. Some people call it a trigger warning. I say it's a discretion, but we're mostly adults here. This is not made for children. But still, as an adult, if it brings back any memories or makes you feel any kind of way, please, 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 um, fast forward through those parts if you want to. But it's just part of the story and I have to tell it, okay? So here we go. So, first of all, after the funeral was over, like I said, we kept dating. He was originally from Utah. I was living in Idaho. He moved to Utah. And the reason they moved to Utah was because his dad got the job as the janitor. And I think we talked about that. So he was living with his mom and he was living with his stepdad as well and his brother, his younger brother. And I probably lived about not like 5 miles away, kind of off on a country road. Pretty nice house. My parents, they did well. And I'm sure that his dad encouraged him, just like he saw in my music teacher, like this her family has it together. They have a little bit of money, they have this land, they have, you know what I mean? This is a good setup here. Because this family, their background is that, they don't have a lot of education, they don't really have money. Um, they come from his mom and dad, were divorced, but they both came from very poor households, um, and they were not active in church. They were members, but not active. And so when they came together, his parents, it was because he had been conceived. So it wasn't like a love story. It was more like, got to do the right thing. So they were pretty young and had him, followed by his two siblings. So yeah, he was the oldest. But when I first met him, I was just this, you know, 16-and-a-half-year-old girl that just kind of was flattered that someone liked me. And so I continued to go out with him. It was pretty much he picked me up, we went and had fast food or whatever like that. My parents despised the idea of him and my being with him. I wish I wish they would have been a little more stringent, a little more strict, and had a talk with me about it. That never happened, but I wish it did. During that time, meeting his mom, I found out that she was a pretty grumpy person. She was the grumpiest of the grumpy. And so was his brother. His stepdad was kind of friendly. His sister wasn't around, but it was kind of a grumpy household. I mean, when I say that, I really mean it, because the comparison to my house, to school, to anyone else's house I've been to ever, I was like, there's a dark cast over this house. Anyways, he should have never repeated this, but he said his mom didn't care for me because my perfume was too strong, and when I came to visit, it was too strong, she could smell it, and when I left, she could smell it. And I'm just a perfume lover. I mean, if you look to the side of me, there's a bunch of bottles of perfume. I love perfume, it's a weakness. I like having my nails done. I'm a girly girl like that. So anyway, hence being a makeup artist. But during this time, I was, you know, just kind of put off and kind of afraid to go to his mom's house. And I noticed that on the weekends she wasn't there, and I thought it was strange. So I asked him. I said, "Does your mom work on the weekend?" Because I knew that she worked. And he said, "Actually, she goes to jail on the weekend." And I was like, I had never heard of such a thing. I said, she goes to jail on the weekend? And why is that? What happened? He said that she was charged. She worked at a gas station and she had been, would you say embezzled, or she stole food and other things, from the gas station because they had food and different things in there. And apparently he was receiving care packages on his mission that were basically items from that store. Oh, I mean, it was a good, she had a good heart, I guess. She was thinking about him and wanted to help him, with the care package. But I mean, stealing from your work is probably not the best idea. So she was caught. And so I don't know what went down, but she had to serve a certain amount of months going to jail on the weekend. So that was a sign. I should have told my parents. Maybe they would have forbid me at that point. So we kept dating, kept dating. And then I kind of saw that he was putting a lot of pressure on me. I was getting closer to the 17 age mark. A lot of pressure on me to get intimate, very touchy feely, not the holding hands, make out thing, but more like, groping, whatever you want to say. And I remember just feeling, because of my past, and if you go back to my videos and you hear about my truth and things like that on that video, you'll understand that because of so many things that happened as a kid, I just kind of fell right into place with that. Like, oh, another person that wants to do this, I didn't really put up a fight. I didn't like the idea of it, but he was also a boyfriend, so it was a little bit different. Anyway, he kept pressuring me until I gave in. And once I gave in, the kicker is because of my Mormon mentality and thinking, I thought, oh no, we've gone all the way here, so that means I've got to marry him, and I've got to marry him in the temple. Like, I have no choice. Like, once this happens, it's set in stone. Does that make sense? So I was feeling, that seemed to be the only thing on his mind after that. That was his main, you know, focus, his favorite activity, still, taking me out to eat and this and that and the other. But he was coming around my parents' house, and I had family members come around that were my age. Little did I know he was flirting with them behind my back. He was flirting with friends during high school because I was, a senior. My senior year was coming to a close, and He was, trying to hit on all my really close friends. He became very creepy. And at my age, I should have realized what creepy was. And apparently, I just looked past all the signals, all the cautionary, tales, and all the red flags. And I think that that would have been normal for me in my mindset. And because of what we did, I think I was just ignoring everything and letting it go in one ear and out the other. And so this is what happened next. So it wasn't like my parents ever said they wanted to meet his parents. There was his dad and his wife and those new 5 kids, right? And then there was the mom and the stepdad and the brother over here and the sister somewhere else. But it wasn't like my parents showed any interest in meeting them, which was very unusual for them. And they showed no interest in meeting my parents. I think his dad met them before anyone. Of course, cha-ching, right? So yeah, time went by, and yeah, I went off to college. I graduated, went off to college, and wasn't paying attention, all that kind of stuff. Um, Broke up with him, got back together with him shortly after. When I got sick, he was kind of my caretaker, kind of did that whole thing. I was up in Rexburg. And then that winter, I was um, like, I don't know, 18ish. My parents had gone away, and he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. And so I told my parents over the phone because I didn't want to tell them in person. They were gone on vacation. And so they weren't very happy or excited about it. There was, yeah, they just weren't. I can't think of many people that were, yeah, no, yeah. So anyway, planned the wedding. It was going to be in June. And so, yeah, my parents had a hard time planning that wedding. I mean, it was going to be in the temple. It shouldn't have been according to the church because you know, we were doing the thing, we were under the sheets. And it was whether I liked it or not, by the way. And that was the worst part because he was definitely addicted. He definitely had a addiction. Absolutely. And he was creepy. And there were so many things I didn't see, but we ended up getting married. I thought that, I've told you before, I thought the temple was going to blow up. I knew that we were going into that temple and that we had been doing that. And I thought, I'm going to hell. I'm sure I am. I am. So we go in and we get married and do the whole thing, have the pictures. The family have come from all over, have the church house reception, all of that. His mom is there with her, everybody's there, you know, and we go on this short honeymoon and everything. And then life comes back, and I go to work and he's working. Well, the problem is, I was working at a job that really wasn't a future. His job really wasn't a future. He didn't have an education, he didn't have a trade. I didn't have a trade. I didn't have an education. What I wanted to do is be an airline stewardess. And they had even come to recruit me. And this was like during the time I was dating him, and my parents said no. They said I couldn't when the people came. I tried so hard, and all I could think of is if they would have said yes, I would have had that career. I would have gotten away. I never would have married him. I would have seen all over the world, the US, whatever, and I would have had a career. But they wanted me to do like, my sister and like all the other Mormon peoples, and get married and have babies. That's what they thought I should do. They did not put any emphasis at all on the idea of me doing this, what I wanted to do. It was really, it upsets me to this day. But anyway, so we're both working, living in an apartment, trying to make ends meet, all that good stuff. And just kind of going through the motions that first year. And here's what happened next. So I get to know his dad's new wife, the one he married 3 weeks after my music teacher died. I get to know her, and she's actually pretty nice. If I'm being honest, she ended up being the most normalish, nice person of the whole damn family when it comes right down to it. So I will say that she was somewhat of a support and had a level mind and was someone that was there for me. And I feel like I was there for her. So she ended up being a really nice lady, I will say. Um, but her husband, he was still, in my opinion, probably a murderer and had really bad intentions all the way around. So we go up to visit them quite often, Sunday dinner kind of a thing. And we walk in the house, and I'm like, wow, I love these kitchen cupboards you've put in the house, because they were still renovating it. And and she just kind of looked at me, and he looked at me and laughed. By then, he had gotten a job working for the church itself, taking care of maintenance at the church houses. Well, apparently he could see the college campus at the time, and he could see that they were putting all of this stuff out in these trucks that they were going to use to refurbish apartments and things for students. And I guess in the middle of the night, he had gone and picked up all these cupboards, you guys, and put them in the back of a truck, all these cabinets, took them to his house and had them there, and then installed them himself. And they look just like the cabinets that would be inside of a church in the kitchen area or in the college. So, yeah, that is crazy town. And I just remember thinking, this guy, he is very criminal like. So then I went back to thinking about my music teacher again. And it was just kind of all these thoughts and ideas. So things go along. I come home from work one day, and there's a letter saying that he's left me, that he's going to leave me, and he's going to be a truck driver, and that's it. That was the perfect opportunity. It's like, hello, Lori, there's your chance to get out. But my 18 and a half self, going, I guess 19 at this point, I wasn't thinking like that. I'm thinking the brainwashing, remember? I'm thinking a temple marriage, stay together forever, be forgiving, be nice, be kind, blah, 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 blah. So I was, I called him, and I was like, he was at his dad's. I knew he would be. And I was like, I'm coming up there to talk to you. And I was like, what's going on? And turns out his dad wanted him to go truck driving with him. So he was okay with abandoning me after this temple marriage and going to be a truck driver. And that would be it. I should have ran for the hills right to my parents' house, got a divorce, and called it a day. But I didn't. I stuck around. He came to his senses, came back home, and I forgave him. What an idiot was I? Yes. And so the saga continues. Time goes by. I get to know his brother. I get to know his brother's wife. I get to know his sister and her husband. Everybody kind of got married around the same time, but kind of got to know who his mom was. We never saw her much. She was just kind of in her own world, which was fine. And we saw his dad and knew stepmom more. But anyway, let me get to the juicy stuff. So we're going along, and our 1 year anniversary pops up. In fact, it was the day before our 1 year anniversary, and a piece of mail comes. And it's from the state of Utah, and it's addressed to him. And I'm like, what's this? And he opens it up, and guess what it is? It is a letter from the state of Utah saying that he owes X amount of dollars for an 8-year-old child that they say he fathered, which would have been like when he was in high school, and that he owes all this back child support. And I'm like, what? I'm like, what? Who is this child? What is even going on? He proceeds to tell me that he had a little situation, not a relationship, but a situation with a gal from high school. She became pregnant. She told him she was seeing a lot of people, he said, and he wanted to do a DNA test because he was getting ready to go on a mission, I guess. And they said, you need to do a DNA because if this child is yours, you can't go. So the baby was born, and he waited at whatever office to do the DNA, and she didn't show up. So the bishop said, you know what? It's probably not yours then, and you can go on your mission. So now all this time's gone by, and here this gal is saying, "You are the father and we want money." So he goes and does a DNA test. I'm just cringing and I'm like, how am I going to tell my parents what's going to happen? And the notification comes in the mail and says, sure enough, 99.999% you are the father. And I'm like, I've married this guy who has no education, no money, no trade. And now I find out he has a child that we have to pay child support for. Like he's had a child before we even were doing anything that way. I'm like, what in the world? I was horrified. I was hurt. I was upset. I was distraught. So I have to go to the parents and tell the parents about it. Worst day ever. My parents tried not to show their disgust, but I know they had it. And my dad was like, you're going to have to get an attorney. He knew one. And he cut a deal so that he didn't have to pay the back, but he had to start paying the current and set on a certain amount. So my dad solved the issue. And I'm sure my dad was just in so much pain, thinking, I knew we didn't want her to marry him. And now look what's happened. So here my dad saves the day. And I think as time went by, they probably disliked him more and more and more. Anyways, time goes by, we're dealing with that. And then one day this news comes out, this major news flash. What is the news flash? His sister announces to everybody in the family that they need to know that she suffered from being molested and slash incest in the house. She announces it to everyone that the dad had taken advantage of her for many years growing up. And in fact, at one point, she even thought she was pregnant. Talk about dropping a bomb. First of all, I'm a compassionate person. I was then, and I still am now. And I was brokenhearted for her. I was shocked, but I was disgusted. And I told him, I can't be around your dad if this is true. Well, his dad didn't deny it. The mom said she never knew anything about it. The siblings, my husband at the time, said he didn't know anything about it. His brother said he didn't know anything about it, but the dad didn't deny it. He admitted it. And he said he was going to go repent of it. And his wife about lost her mind when she found out about it too, because that really disgusted her. And I think she had a hard time after that with being with him. Yeah, for sure. So all this comes out, and that's a huge explosion, and I'm just like, what in the world? This is like, I don't know. It's reminding me of that television show. What was it called? Beverly Hillbillies? Yeah, sorry. So a little bit of time goes by, and I'm having discussions with my new sister-in-law, his brother's wife. We're getting to know each other. She starts telling me about how her husband is giving her a hard time about her weight. Shocker, because where did we hear that before? With the dad, with the guy that I married, and now with the brother. So all of them have a thing about women and weight and body shaming and fat shaming and whatever shaming. And that's disgusting. So she's kind of like upset about that and is trying to diet. I thought she looked fabulous and I told her. But yeah, they were having difficulties. Everybody was having difficulties. And all of a sudden, at one point, we're at my parents. They're gone on vacation. We're house sitting. And he says, I have something to tell you. And I'm like, okay, what? Like at this point, what else could be worse than what he's already told me, right? What could be worse? It was worse. It was like it blew the roof right off the house. I mean, my spirit left my body. He says, remember the story about my dad and my sister and everything? And I'm like, yes. I'm like, yes. Deep breath. I'm like, it's tragic. It's been hard. It's caused a lot of problems. Yes, I know. And it's put a strain. And he says, well, there's something I have to tell you. And I'm like, what? And he's like, I also participated in that. And I said, what? I mean, what do you mean? Like, explain this to me. And he explains to me that he and his sister had also had an incestuous relationship. And at that point, I was like, I think I want to divorce him immediately. This is too much for me. I'm too young to comprehend all this stuff. I, life has already been a certain way, and this is just too much. And so I'm freaking out and everything. And um, I'm talking to the new mother in law that ended up being really nice. And she's just like, oh, wow. And I could confide in her because she kind of got that bombshell dropped on her too. And I'm talking to the brother's wife, and she's like, oh man, she's like, that's terrible. I mean, the family was all going to know. It was like, I don't know why they felt comfortable just getting it all out into the world, out into our family right then. And I'm like, wow. And I thought that's all I could handle. And then he starts telling me about growing up on the farm, being at his grandmother's in Utah, and talking about experimental things with his cousin, who is a he. This is when he was growing up before, he moved to Idaho. And they were into some crazy stuff with each other. And then this is really hard to say, but it's the honest to God truth. And even saying it out loud, you guys, for me, I hope you know that it takes every single bit of courage for me to say this, because I married this person and I believed that we were married for time and eternity. And the more these things came out, the more trapped I felt and forced to forgive. And it was just a nightmare. It was just a nightmare. And he said, I don't know what the name of it is. I can't think of it, but there's a name for it. When a person experiments with animals, um, teenage boys with raging hormones out in the country that haven't learned any morals, haven't been properly raised or taught right from wrong, or whatever. But it was a little bit too much. And he was telling me this all at one time. It was just too much. And I just said, I need some time. I need some time. I remember saying I needed to pray. Oh God, Lori, you needed to pray. Like that was going to do anything. I'm not saying I'm against prayer. I'm not saying I'm against spirituality. But don't marry me and then drop bombs on me about, you know, incest and about a child that I didn't know you had. And then also now this thing with animals going on. I literally felt like throwing up. I literally did. So all this is going on. I don't talk about the animal thing with anybody else, but it comes out about he and his sister. And I remember his brother's wife saying, man, I'm so sorry, Lori. She's like, I'm so glad that my husband had nothing to do with anything like that. And I'm like, yeah, you're lucky. You're really lucky. Well, one day he decides to have a talk with his wife. And you know what I'm about to say. He too had had a relationship with his sister. So the dad and the two sons, or two brothers, all in the same house, were doing this. And the mom had no clue. She says she was working. The brothers admitting it, the sisters not denying it. Nobody's denying any of it. They're coming clean with it all. So that sister-in-law, the brother's wife's having a hard time with it. I'm having a hard time with it. Everybody's having a hard time with it. And I'm just thinking, I need to get out of Dodge. But what will my parents say if I say I want a divorce, and a temple divorce at that? They're going to say, "We told you so." They're going to be disappointed in me. They're going to think badly about me. I put all that on me instead of saying, "Look, this is what he's told me, and I can't handle that. That kind of future with somebody I can't deal with. I can't trust them." Instead, the 19-year-old just said, "Okay, you know, I know you may find this hard to believe." And really just saying it out loud is just, you can't make this shit up. You just can't. But basically, it was very up and down. It was, he went from job to job. We went from apartment to apartment. I never went back to school. I, I kept working at the same job, but we just were living, scraping by. My parents were always helping. His parents weren't. They didn't have money anyway. But the point is that we weren't even propelled forward to one of us going to school while one works and kind of doing something, becoming something, supporting, like growing. There was none of that. He didn't have that desire. And I think I felt wore down. I think I felt depressed. I think my anxiety had reached a new level. But um, basically, yeah, I found out he was a complete creepo and was unfaithful to me at one point. And we all know how we find out about that in different ways. And so did the brothers, or so did the brother. He was unfaithful to his wife. And it just, it was like something that they never got therapy for or worked out. And this was their normal. And for us, this was just foreign ground and foreign concepts and shocking. So, anyway, this went on for 9 years. Um, and as soon as my mom passed away, weirdly enough, I was planning it. I'd already thought, I don't want to be in this church. I was already planning it. And I knew that I wanted to get out of the marriage. My mom was sick. I didn't wish that on my mom, but it happened. And when it happened, I just thought, and it was terminal, I thought, I am going to get out of this marriage. I'm going to get out of this church. And I was going through the grieving process. And on top of it, that's exactly what I did, was got a divorce. After getting the divorce from him, he came to the house. He had a key. He came in. He had been drinking. He was drunk. He was argumentative. I was upstairs, and he threw me down a set of stairs. And after that, violated me. There was an essay. The police were called. I was going to go to the hospital for a rape kit. When I got to the hospital, I was met by his dad and his mother-in-law, who said, "You shouldn't do this. He'll lose his job. He'll never be able to work. He'll go to jail. Don't do this to him. Blah 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 blah. Forgive him, or don't, but just don't do it." And I actually felt so guilty that I didn't do it, but I did divorce him. I had divorced him, so I wasn't his wife. Whether we were married or not, he had no right to do those things. And I kind of got injured. Now, in between the time of the marriage till the end, in those short, like 9 years, there was a lot of collateral damage to individuals. And I don't want to speak on that. And I'll never speak on that on this channel out of respect. But there was a lot of people that had collateral damage and were estranged, and we don't speak. And these are not in-laws, sister-in-law, brother-in-law. I don't have any contact with any of those people anyway. But some other people, that there was some collateral damage, and some people that were very much hurt. And yeah, we're estranged. And I'm definitely not a perfect person, but that was a lot to go through. And shortly after that, I was still grieving my mom, um, but I moved, I left, and I decided that I needed to pull myself up and I needed to find what I could do to use a trade so that I could support myself. So I came back east, and I started at a makeup counter. I applied for a job and started working um, behind the counter at Nordstrom. And I think actually Nordstrom might have been a Mormon owned store at the time. I'm not sure. Something to do with that because at one point they were closed on Sundays. Anyway, then they took that away. But I worked there, made great friends, loved the diversity of this area, loved the different mindsets and the cultures and all of that. It was just a whole new world. My career escalated. I developed it. I'm a self-taught makeup artist. Uh, when you work at a department store, you're basically a sales clerk, you know, but naturally I'd always been drawn to, doing makeup. And so it was easy for me to get into that field and just kind of build up until I finally, started working for myself, which was great. Um, Obviously, after some time, I got married here and have my twins, um, and they're in high school. But I just wanted to share a little bit about me. It takes a lot of courage for me to start this YouTube channel, to talk about some of the things. That's why in between I like to talk about some of the statistics about the church or some of the subject matter, because it did I mean, it did cause nightmares in the church, like nightmares in the church house. You know, our reception for our wedding was at the church house. We got married in the temple. We went to the church house all the time. We like the church house and the church surrounds all these things. And yes, all of his family were members of the church. And yes, he was a member of the church. And yes, he was a returned missionary. But I found out later also during confession time when someone called and wanted to talk to him. I don't know how they had his number. I think he must have called them. That on his mission, he hadn't even followed the guidelines of the church and had slept with a woman on his mission. So, I was just like, yeah, so much for a returned missionary. He had one bomb to drop after another, one bomb after the other. So it makes me look really stupid and naive, at 19, 20, all the way to 29 years old, um, wasting my time on the church and their beliefs, living on other people's principles and testimonies with a horrible man and with a disjointed family. And while I empathize with people and I understand that people come from different backgrounds and they've been through a lot in their own lives, I just thought that it was pretty unfortunate that he saw me a mile away, just like his dad saw my music teacher a mile away. But I survived. I left it, I got away, and I got to the other side of the United States, and I I became successful, but I never got rid of this residual guilt and this some of this brainwashing with the church. And I've tried to talk about it to therapists, but they don't get it because they don't know about the church. And it's a little too much for them, and they get a glazed over look like a deer in headlights and don't really know what to say to me. And so I feel like instead of writing in a journal, I'm talking to you. I hope you can't relate to me on some of these things. On other things, I hope you can. And I hope that you can share your wealth of knowledge and your opinions and your thoughts and ideas. This is not me looking for a pity party or sympathy. This is me just getting it off my chest. That's why I say at the beginning, if this is this is a little heavy, a little heavier today, but I'm not trying to negative vibes. This is just a story. Not all stories are fairy tales. They don't always have fairy tale endings. And but I will say that I'm happy with the turn that I took, what I was able to do, and that I was able to get away from the church, even though they still try to knock on the door and call and all that stuff. And the family comes around me and still pressures me and tells me my life would be better if I paid tithing financially, that things would be better for me in this way, that way, and the other way. But they don't know a lot about a lot of things. And, you know, honestly, even if I told them, they'd just say, forgive, forgive, forgive. So I'm not going to do that. But that's a little bit about me. I will end this with a positive note. Career's going good. Motherhood's going good. I have a puppy I love. I have friends. I have a lot of makeup artist friends all over the world. And also, just if you've ever wondered, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, I actually am Greek. I don't know if you've ever been to Greece, but that's just a little tidbit there. And yeah, so a Greek Mormon. Who would have thought that my dad would be a convert to the church? Because he was Greek, even though I was adopted, my biological father's Greek and he's Greek. I just think, most Greeks would be hard to convert, you know? Yeah, Greek Orthodox is pretty much their religion. But anyway, I wanted to talk about something else here at the end. And um, I covered my silver roots. That's a positive note. I can't stand it when I see those come out. And yeah, I know this was a lot. Thank you for listening. Sorry, my microphone. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your kindness. Um, and your patience with me, as sometimes I know I get off on the story, but this isn't something I would take notes about or it would seem fake. I have to talk about it in real time, like you're my friend. Um, these are not statistics. This is not research. This is my life. This was my life. This was my life. So yeah, but things are better. And here we are together on YouTube, you and me. And I love to hear from you. So I hope you have a good rest of your evening, sending all the love, all the positive vibes, all the goodness. Um, and yeah, until next time, my friends.